Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SPPI-TV. I'm your host and the president of the Southwest Public Policy Institute, Patrick Brenner. I am pleased to be joined today by Linda DeVlieg. Linda is a former real estate commissioner with the New Mexico Real Estate Commission, and we're going to talk about exactly what happened with the Real Estate Commission, the loss of Linda as a real estate commissioner, what that means for the state of New Mexico, what happened, why it happened, and hopefully we have a really good discussion. Linda, we were actually pitching this to, it was KRQE or KOAT?
KRQE.
And they declined to broadcast it because they just determined that it wasn't a good fit for television. And I understand that perspective. Like, it's really hard to condense everything that we've already talked about into like a 5-minute television spot. Like, I get that. It was much more suited appropriately to a long form interview. And that's what we're doing today. I just want to get all the facts out, all the details out, and figure out exactly what happened. And then maybe start guessing as to the motives behind it. So
Yes.
How long were you on the Real Estate Commission? Let's start with that.
I was appointed in November of 2021.
Okay. And then before your appointment in 2021, how long have you been in real estate altogether?
30 years.
Okay.
30 years this year.
Well, thank you so much for your many years of service to the New Mexico real estate industry. What does the Real Estate Commission do?
So the mission of the Real Estate Commission is to, in plain language, represent the public's interest in real estate transactions. We're here also to facilitate education and licensing procedures for real estate professionals.
And presently, in the event of licensing, how does that get managed? You work closely with the regulations and licensing department?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say we have a new individual who's interested in becoming a real estate agent, and they're applying for licensure. They've taken the exam. That's all managed through RLD.
It's managed through the licensing system that RLD facilitates.
Okay.
After the prospective licensee has taken their required education, that education is reviewed and submitted. They sit for an exam. If they pass the exam, then the process moves through the RLD licensing network, and you're issued a real estate license.
Okay. So from a outsider's perspective, are you in charge of RLD, or does RLD see themselves as in charge of you?
Right there is your, that's the hammer on the nail.
I figured that would be a good question, and you'd enjoy answering this one.
So that is the dispute that has been around, that I've been hearing for quite some time. By statute, they are administratively attached, which I think in layman's language, because they've argued that it's not specific what that means, which it depends on how you want it interpreted and what side of the fence you're sitting on. But administratively attached, to me and most other people thinking about it, would imply that they're there to facilitate administratively what the Real Estate Commission approves and submits to them for action items.
Okay.
But that's, in theory, that's not what's been happening.
Did you notice a change during your tenure, or was this always the case throughout your entire service on the commission?
It was something that we inherited, where there were 3 new commissioners that all came on board in November of 21. And it's something that we had heard about attending Real Estate Commission meetings. We kept kind of hearing this overlay of discussion about budgets and procedures and things to get done. And of course, when you're on one side of the door, it looks different than when you get behind the door. You realize what's been going on. So I'm thinking it had been going on for maybe 5 or 6 years So two or 3 years before we came on board.
Okay. And you mentioned the budget, and based on our previous
Mhm.
discussions over a couple of lunches, it was your questioning of the budget or lack thereof that really started the what would you call it? The headbutting, the friction.
Correct. So,
The,
mhm.
the commission is obligated to maintain a budget, and within that budget, there's accommodation for the emergency fund. Can we talk about the existence of the budget, or the lack of existence of the budget, and then also what the emergency fund is meant
Yeah, the
for?
real estate recovery fund, and it's a statutory
Thank you.
requirement. Um, and it's meant for assistance in helping the public recover from any real estate wrongdoings that the commission might think is necessary to help. You know what, I'm going to and at some point, let's go back and I'm going to read that statute to you.
About the real estate
Fund,
recovery
yeah.
fund. Okay,
So,
yeah. Well, I mean, we could, let's take a break right now and actually just get it out on
yeah,
the table. Could you read
yeah,
that
let me
statute for
get
me?
here. And of course, since they don't give us a book anymore to look up things, that's the other item, is we have to actually go to the statute website.
I can't imagine why that is.
Because, yeah, they don't like us to. Oh, there, okay.
Linda, stop asking questions.
Stop asking questions.
Stop.
So I can read you the statute. Real Estate Recovery Fund.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Article 29, 61-29-21. The fund was created. There is created in the state treasury a fund which shall be known as the Real Estate Recovery Fund, to be administered by the Real Estate Commission in accordance with the provisions of the Real Estate Recovery Fund Act. All money received by the Real Estate Commission pursuant to the Real Estate Recovery Fund Act shall be credited to the Real Estate Recovery Fund. In the Real Estate Recovery Fund, bonds or treasury certificates under such rules and regulations as may be prescribed by the State Board of Finance, provided no investments shall be made which will impair the necessary liquidity required to satisfy judgment payments awarded pursuant to the Real Estate Recovery Fund Act. All interest earned from such investments shall be credited back to the fund to pay any future judgments. And then there's fees involving this, and then it's required to have a minimum balance of $150,000 at any given point in time. And so there's a budget on top of just the Real Estate Recovery Fund, and the Real Estate Commission collects approximately $400, just under $400, every time a licensee renews on their 3-year cycle. So there's 3 years that you have to take continuing education, submit that, you renew your license, and pay approximately $400.
How many real estate agents are there in New Mexico, both associate and qualifying brokers?
So at any given point in time, of course, it's hard to set a number at any time because there are people coming and going and suspension and
sure, like
yeah,
around
12 to 13,000.
Okay.
So it's the largest membership of any of the boards and commissions that RLD is administratively attached to. And so we bring in approximately $1.5 million a year. And so it's a very wealthy board. And so we kept asking for money, and we would not only need funds for the Real Estate Recovery Fund, but also for real estate commission staff, investigators, staff, dedicated staff, which also changed. They no longer became dedicated just to the Real Estate Commission. And so we were asking vociferously about the budget. Where's the budget? How much do we have? And that question didn't get answered until probably 2 weeks ago. And
How have you ever seen a budget prepared by RLD for the Real Estate Commission, or have you ever seen? You've never seen
no,
a
we
budget
never
at
did.
all?
We were at one meeting, I believe it was November's meeting in 2024. The director verbally presented some numbers.
Who is the director? Can I get
Melissa
a name?
Salazar, Director Salazar. And she verbally presented some numbers, and I requested that it be put into print format, and it really never was a proper budget presented until after I was gone. And then I believe it was pressure from a legislator, a lawmaker.
Okay, and that's just we can't prove that. We're just insinuating, if you will.
Okay.
Right? Or can we prove it?
Yes. So I received
Okay.
a budget from that lawmaker, and part of that was made public in the last meeting. I attended as a member of the public, but not all of it. The Real Estate Recovery Fund was presented, but there were still some line items in a budget, and so that
is from that budget at that public meeting that you attended, is the Real Estate Recovery Fund maintaining that minimum balance that's statutorily required?
according to what they say, yes, on paper it was.
But we've never actually seen a statement from the bank attesting to the existence of those funds.
Or from the state auditors, no.
Okay. Does the state auditor have subpoena power to subpoena the bank statements?
I'm going to assume yes, but I can't say that for sure.
Sure. Okay. Wow. So you started asking questions about the budget. You started asking questions about the existence of not the existence of the Real Estate Recovery Fund, but whether or not it was appropriately liquid. And you didn't get answers.
No.
They weren't giving you answers, and they didn't like you asking questions about this.
Or anything.
They didn't like having to be accountable for this money that is meant for making individual buyers whole. So let's actually take a step back and examine like a what if scenario of why the Real Estate Recovery Fund would need to be tapped, if you will. And I'm buying a house, and my real estate agent, well, maybe this is a bad example because I don't want Billy to think that I'm saying anything negative about him. My wife and I just bought a house with Billy Wynn. That's how we got in touch with each other. He was absolutely amazing. I have zero complaints. But let's say somebody else is buying a house and their real estate agent does them a disservice and doesn't ask the right question or something like that, and something goes wrong with the transaction, and the buyer of the property is damaged as a result, financially damaged as a result of the negligence or ineptitude of the broker themselves. What kind of scenario exists that would cause damage like that for a buyer or a seller of a property?
So there was a 2021 amendment to this Real Estate Recovery Fund Act, and it sets out a procedure. And one of the first procedures is a filing of a petition by the member of the public as required by a statute 612923 NMS.
So anyone can file a petition?
Yes, according to those,
okay,
to what the requirements are. The commission conducts a hearing in the same manner as we had other hearings regarding complaints. under the Uniform Licensing Act, and the commission may compromise a claim based upon the application of that petitioner. So it's much like when we have a complaint filed, we issue a notice of contemplated action or a pre-notice of contemplated action. That defendant basically will say, I disagree with that, I want a hearing. So that's their due process. And so one of the commissioners is appointed as a hearing officer, and you have the hearing. That commissioner takes back to the commission in closed session their findings, and then the commission as the board will make that final decision. The same thing happens with using this real estate recovery fund based on specific findings of.
So you've actually been a hearing officer
Yes.
in some of these complaints.
Right. Now, I've never been a hearing officer, nor do I know that anything had ever been filed recently for the real estate recovery fund. But I have been a hearing officer for complaints, yes.
In your time of service on the commission and in your experience with hearing some of these complaints, what was the average age of the complaint itself? Like what was the time frame between when the complaint was submitted and when you were actually hearing the complaint from the complainant directly during the hearing?
A couple of them were a long time. I would say months and months. In other words, I was inheriting it from, I didn't see it actually as a complaint. Previous board had probably seen it as a complaint. It just kept passing through the proper channels until it went to a hearing. It's a very long process.
Okay. Can it sometimes take multiple years to resolve?
Because it can go to civil court, and it can bounce around between the commission and a civil case. And oftentimes, the attorneys will use the commission's discovery process before they'll actually step in with a civil complaint. So we will do the investigation. By we, I mean the investigators assigned to the cases who are not commissioners. And there's stacks of evidence that is collected. It's supposed to be stacks of evidence collected and findings. And then if it gets to a hearing, if that respondent, which is what they're called in our situation,
the respondent is the party being blamed for the
wrongdoing. Yeah.
Okay.
Then we'll take that to the hearing, and you're usually inheriting a case from a former board, because each of us have a 5-year term unless the new governor comes in and doesn't change the current seated members. So it's my understanding that the hearings that I was in charge of, that I presided over, were cases from before my appointment.
Okay. Now, generally speaking, in the event of a new gubernatorial administration, is the entire board replaced?
I would have to look back historically, not necessarily. Some governors have come in and swept the whole board and replaced, and that goes for all the boards and commissions under RLD. There's an accountancy board and a nursing board and body art and decorating and landscaping architects. So sometimes they're swept, sometimes they're kept. The board that I came in behind was kept on through the pandemic. I was actually called the day after the current governor's inauguration, probably a week after that, and asked if I would like to be considered. But the vetting process takes a long time. You have to get an FBI background check and a lot of things in theory. And so it took quite a long time for my appointment to actually take place. I don't know the reason for that. It could have been other projects on her desk, but three of us came in to replace three, and then there was one board member that retired soon after. So this is practically a whole new board. It was.
Okay.
Now it's really new.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to episode 25 of SPPI-TV, the public podcast, the policy podcast of the Southwest Public Policy Institute. My guest today is Linda DeVlieg Killman. She's an associate broker with Linda DeVlieg Real Estate, and she is also the former commissioner on the New Mexico Real Estate Commission. And we're talking today about what is going on with the current Real Estate Commission and some of the problems associated with the budget, some of the problems associated with the Real Estate Recovery Fund. And it's been a really riveting discussion so far. I mean, these questions are just naturally coming up, and I'm concerned. I am. So in the event that a new governor is elected and a real estate commission is already sitting on the board, how many members are there at minimum?
Has to be three minimum in order for a quorum.
And it could be as large as five?
Correct.
Right. All right. So anywhere between 3 and 5 real estate commissioners sitting on the real estate commission. Minimum of 3, maximum of 5. Let's say that there are 5 members on the Real Estate Commission. And if you don't know the answer to this question, I'm genuinely curious. If there's 5 members that are currently sitting on the Real Estate Commission, November rolls around, we elect a new governor, January rolls around, the new governor takes office, and they want to replace the Real Estate Commission. What does that new governor do in order to replace those real estate commissioners? Does the governor ask for their resignation? Can the governor dismiss them and then appoint new members? What do you know what the actual process is? I don't. I'm curious.
So by statute, you serve at the governor's pleasure. Which means, yes, they can come in as a new executive and replace everyone according to their pleasure. But you're also, if you're removed during that appointment, it's supposed to be with cause. And so when I was removed, there was no cause given.
Well, we're going to get into your removal in just a second. No, that's a really interesting point, and I want to talk about that. It's a critical linchpin to your story. Specifically, so let's say Deb Haaland takes the governorship in not this year, next year, when the election is at the end of 2026. Let's say that Deb Haaland wins and she wants to replace the board. She doesn't have to provide cause to remove the real estate commissioners.
No, not as
because it's a new administration.
Correct, right.
Okay, so she just asks for their resignation, or she just she appoints new members in accordance with the appointment process. Right. Okay, but in your case, you were dismissed.
I was removed by what was quoted in the letter, a constitutional provision, which technically I did some study on it. That's not the provision that allows the executive to remove a commissioner. You're supposed to be removed for cause. The constitutional provision that was quoted in the letter, I believe, refers to executive staff. But in either case, I was not given cause.
So we have this April 10th letter, and it was allegedly signed by Michelle Lujan Grisham. I'm not a forensic analyst. I can't ascertain as to whether or not the signature is legitimate. I can say with certainty that there is no metadata in this PDF, which is unusual from my perspective. There is no author listed. There's no creation date listed. It's very It's a very odd looking PDF. And I don't mean to like go into the conspiratorial realm. It's just it's strange. It's a strange PDF. So you have this letter that was addressed to you, where the governor is saying, I have chosen to exercise my authority under Article 5, Section 5 of the New Mexico Constitution to remove you from your governor-appointed position on the New Mexico Real Estate Commission. Your removal from the Real Estate Commission is effective as of April 11th, 2025 at 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude and thank you for your service on Real Estate Commission. Well, first, thank you, Linda, for your service on the Real Estate Commission. We appreciate your years of service. But this document, this PDF, was sent by not an assistant with the governor, but by it was the executive assistant of Melissa Salazar, Patricia Tapia.
Correct. Director Salazar, it's my understanding, and it may not be current today, but up to that point had two capacities. She was director of boards and commissions and also served in the governor's office. So basically, if you called the governor to complain about something, she'd be the one that would get the message.
That doesn't seem like an appropriate separation of power. That seems odd to me. Is that from your experience and how I mean, in your 30 years of real estate and your experience in interfacing with the commission, is that typical?
No.
Yeah.
No, because, and I will say a lot of real estate licensees don't have a real in-depth understanding of what the real estate commission does, unless they get into trouble, then all of a sudden they know who they are. But before I was appointed and had the thrill of serving, my interaction with the Real Estate Commission was always very positive. In fact, I did a story with one of the investigators with KRQE back in 2011, I think it was, or 15. I'd have to get that date, but I was interviewed in a news story about my feelings about the Real Estate Commission. And I've never had anything but the best interaction with the investigators, the secretaries, the licensing staff. At one time, it was running like a smooth machine. And then it wasn't. And so staff was changed, procedures changed. It was never my experience that it was a bad experience to interact with the Real Estate Commission.
And then came the commission under Michelle.
Correct. Yeah. And like I said, it's when I first came in, there was so much turmoil going on, but I didn't understand what the turmoil was. But I heard from the previous commissioners that they were very, very upset about what was happening. There was a lot of internal, behind the scenes employee unhappiness with RLD's oversight of the department and departments. I was hearing that other boards were having the same issue. So by the time we got in there, I felt like the real work of the Real Estate Commission was sidelined by having to manage the hostility going on created by RLD itself.
Wow.
In other words, one of the things that they started to do, which caused probably the big first step off the ladder, if you will, is they took the investigators who were trained, real estate experienced investigators dedicated just to the Real Estate Commission. And as far as I know, the investigators have always been just dedicated to the Real Estate Commission. They all of a sudden took those investigators and tried and assigned them to other boards. like, okay, now you're going to start investigating accounting violations. Well, like what?
Simultaneously investigating accounting and real
Correct.
estate?
And
So they're no longer specialist
no.
investigators.
And so those trained investigators who we relied on as professionals and commissioners, they retired. And so
these investigators were forced out.
they retired. Mm-hmm. And so
Okay.
the investigators brought in fact, by RLD's statement, were not going to be trained in real estate.
That seems like a disservice to
Absolutely.
the public. Would you say that the public is being better served now by the commission and the regulations and licensing department than 10 years ago?
No, not at all. That's my
downhill.
Totally downhill. I was put here to protect the public. It's how I run my business, is to protect the public. And they are not serving the public at all. They're wanting to run a very tight-knit, convenient, and I guess fiscally responsible department at the public's expense by shrinking everything down.
A penny wise, pound foolish, almost. Okay. Linda, you've been in real estate for 30 years, and now that you're no longer on the commission, you're back to running your business full time. How is that? How's that going for you? How's the market? What does that all look like? And how can people find out more about how to work with you if they want to hire you as their agent and broker?
Well,
tell us about you.
I got into real estate kind of by accident. I was going in one direction and said, look over here. And pretty soon I was in real estate. I was going to go to law school, made application, and then went, how about that? And so that's what I did. And it's an amazing experience. Every day is an adventure. And yes, I was even trying to practice real estate while I was getting paid $45 per meeting, serving as a commissioner. But
right, the compensation for a commissioner is it's per diem.
Yeah.
Wow, and they don't compensate you very much. So you were doing that out of the goodness.
That's really
of your
what
heart.
you do. But real estate wise, I think housing to me it's everything. It's what you wake up to. So it's very important. And see,
yeah, I do. I'm here right now.
And it's the biggest single investment that a consumer is going to make. The average consumer, more than average consumer. And just a statistic to throw out there, for every real estate transaction, and this comes from a statistic from the National Association of Realtors, every real estate transaction in the state of New Mexico generates over $105,000 into the economy of New Mexico. So every single time somebody transfers real estate, you're going to see a ripple effect through other economies in the state. So it's not to be taken lightly.
Where can I find a copy of that study? I want to be able to provide a link in the notes for the podcast episode, and you can check in the notes after the episode airs. I'd love to be able to provide a copy of that study. I mean, that's over $100,000.
I presented that one
in economic benefit, in economic activity as a result of every single real estate transaction. That is absolutely incredible.
Nice.
I was talking with one of the fellas over at one of the builders, one of the local builders, and they were talking about how much more expensive it has gotten just for permitting in the state of New Mexico, and how much more expensive it is to build a home in New Mexico just because of the red tape. So outside of that, though, that's just new construction. We're talking about existing construction also. I'd love a copy of that study.
I'll get it to you.
How can people find out more about you, Linda?
I'm with Keller Williams Realty.
What's your website?
realestateinabq.com. That's one of them.
Perfect.
That's the.
I was looking at your email footer while we were talking, and I wanted to make sure I
Yep,
grabbed the
that's
right
it.
one. Okay. Realestateinabq.com. Linda DeVlieg Real Estate. Linda, we're coming up on 40 minutes. I want to wind down our discussion. If you had, I want to go back to the how's the market first of all. Before let's put a
Oh,
cap on that
one
part
of
of the
my
conversation.
yeah,
How's the
one of my
market?
favorite topics is don't look so much at the numbers, look at your experience. And so there's a lot of really great stats and numbers and bar graphs and everything. And I think the average person, including me, I'm just not really good at bar graphs and numbers. I know what I experience in the market, and a good property, well taken care of, presented properly and accurately, and managed in the sale is going to sell. And so prices, back during the pandemic, prices went through the roof. Nobody could deny that. I didn't need a bar graph
Right.
to figure that one out. But things have slowed down a bit. I go by the tenor, the feel of the market. So I can put a house on the market and you get a lot of showings the first few days. You might get an offer or two, but it's not frantic. It's not writing contracts on the hood of cars anymore like it was a few years back. But the market is still good. Albuquerque does not suffer the highs and lows, say that Phoenix metropolitan area, the Dallas market. We're just kind of slow and steady. And so I think if you follow the basic rules of pricing well, staging, proper representation, it's going to be successful. And if you pick the right process to purchase and you pick the right process to sell, you're going to have good results.
Just speaking from my personal experience, I have sold one home in the last 12 months, and I have purchased one home in the last 12
Congratulations, you
months. Well, the
contributed
last
to the
60
economy.
days. I've contributed $200,000 to the economy. That feels
Doesn't it?
pretty good. In selling our home, the previous home, we had our agent encouraged us to stage the home. So we found a staging company. We paid the staging company, had the lawn fixed, patched all the holes in the wall from my. I have an art collection problem, so I was always putting anchors in the wall, and I had to take all the anchors
Yeah.
out when we sold the house. But patching all the anchor holes in the wall, not any other kind of holes, just the
Yeah.
anchor holes. Patching all of that, getting the house ready, staging the home, getting the landscaping in order. We paid some companies to manage that process for us. But we had it listed on Friday, and we were under contract before the end of the weekend.
Excellent.
And that was just 2024. I think that was July of 2024. And then we had a closing date 45 days out. And then most recently, Billy and I were looking for homes for like a week. We looked at some DR Horton. I like new builds. I like not having to
Yeah.
live where somebody else has lived before. There's something nice about
Mhm.
that. So we looked at a couple of new builds. DR Horton was one of them. Hakes Brothers properties. We looked at those too. We looked at Abrazos. And I don't know if we ever looked at any Richmond America homes. Whatever. We looked at a few over the week. The DR Horton ones were very modern. They had a lot of modern conveniences, good like smart home connectivity, stuff like that. That was neat. I like that. That tickled my tech fancy a little bit. But the curb appeal left something to be desired, and I felt as though we would have difficulty selling the home in the future if we had selected a DR Horton property. So we ended up looking at some of the Abrazos properties, and they just didn't have anything in the right location. And we ended up finding a good Hakes Brothers community that is way out in
Mhm.
BFE. I'm gonna leave that acronym in and just call it BFE. We are way out on the west side of
Right.
Rio Rancho at Paseo del Volcan and Broadmoor. But I came in on a Sunday afternoon. Billy wasn't with us at the time. We were just driving past one of the communities. I had the kids in the car. I'm like, "Hey, kids, we're gonna go look at some of these houses. Is that okay?" "Yeah, Dad, we want to go look at the houses. Sure." Um, we worked with Edward. We let him know, hey, Billy's our real
Yeah,
estate agent.
that
Oh
works.
yeah, we had a great experience with Edward. He's like, yeah, come take a look at all these properties. I'm like, okay, cool. We did, and Billy and I put in an offer on Monday, and we closed in less than 3 days.
Excellent. Well, see, and that's the thing about real estate is one size does not fit all. Everybody has their own passion and what triggers their perfect home. And what might fit one person might be awful for somebody else. And but there's so many, you can't make a bad choice, I don't think, in real estate. When I've, when I look at that,
Find a good agent, though. You got to find a good
yeah,
agent that gets you, that understands you, and that
yeah,
represents you.
absolutely. You've got to
Yeah.
find somebody. I was having a conversation with a former client yesterday who's going to be selling soon, and she was hooked up with a broker in the destination city, and anyway, it was an automated system that this broker was sending her information for homes, and one of the bits of information was a data bit about holding costs, monthly costs. And she said, what does this monthly cost mean? Because I'm paying cash. And sorry to say, the realtor didn't know the answer to that question. So, that might not have been a good fit for this client. So you got to pick somebody who's speaking your language. Now, to somebody else might have looked at that figure and not cared a bit. But you've got to find somebody who speaks your language, who listens. Old-fashioned real estate still prevails. You got to listen to what the client really wants, and don't plug in just the newest thing, right? Just unless you understand it and know how to explain it. But real estate, when I look back on the houses that I've owned, not a single one of them is worth less than what I paid for it. And so it's kind of magic. I own a house right now. I took my retirement account money and bought a house. It hasn't lost value, and I just keep getting paid as a rental every single month. It's like magic. So to me, you can tell real estate kind of gets me going, and it's every day I look and go, ooh, maybe I should buy that house. Now I'm into collections. Like, you collect art, I'd like to collect and I can collect art to
That's
put
awesome.
in the houses. But it's a great wealth builder for
You collect the houses for the art space.
Why don't we do that? What?
And you're speaking
There
my
you
language. I don't think I've ever had a bad experience with a real estate agent in New Mexico.
That's good.
I don't think I've ever had a negative experience. They've all been absolutely fantastic. They do listen. They listen. They speak. When you find somebody who listens that can then speak your language, that understands your priorities. Like with the last house that we sold, I wanted it sold. I'm like, sell this as fast as we can. Like, I don't care. Just get it off my books. That was my priority, and he did. He absolutely did. Got it off my books in under 60 days. That was amazing. Had us under contract in less than a weekend. That was awesome. Like, he even came out with the drones and took the nice aerial footage of the property, because it was on like almost a half an acre near Enchanted Hills. It was decent property, new. It was a new build. Anyway, Linda, if you, in closing this episode of SPPI-TV, I want to know, if you had a magic wand and you could wave your magic wand and do one thing to fix the real estate commission and the problems that you've seen over the last couple of years that have morphed into this bigger issue, if you could wave that magic wand and fix it, how would you fix it?
I would make the Mexico Real Estate Commission autonomous. I would remove it from that department, have it a standalone or put it into a department or an entity that would allow it to run the way it's supposed to run. And I was making a little bit of that noise, and I think that's why I was reassigned. So I think that is going to be the ultimate fix. Other states have their real estate commissions under various different departments and entities, and I think that could happen here.
Okay. I think those are good fixes. I like that idea. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of SPPI TV. Thank you so much, Linda DeVlieg, for joining us today. Again, associate broker with Linda DeVlieg Real Estate. You can find out more about Linda and her company at realestateinabq.com. Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. There's lots to tell, and I hope people can reach out if they have questions.
Well, I want them to watch the episode and then to continue tracking the issue as we're tracking it with SPPI, and keep an eye on the Real Estate Commission and the goings-on and see what's being done to fix the problem.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for watching another episode of SPPI TV. I'm your host, Patrick Brenner, and I will see you next time.